Good morning, insiders. My name is Nia, and today we are on week 2 of our In Harmony cycle series, where we will be discussing various ways in which we can be more in flow and in alignment with the phases of our cycle. So I will give about a minute or so for those of you who want to tune in live to show up. If you are tuning in live, you have the ability to ask questions at the end. So I highly encourage you, if you have the next 10 to 15 minutes, just to carve this time out, especially if you're someone who battles with PMS, because that is what we are going to talk about today. Creating a new perspective of PMS and its symptoms. I think sometimes as women, we equate PMS to having a period and that we have to suffer for 1 to 2 weeks, which is essentially half of our lives, if you look at it that way, out of the month or our life, where we have things like bloat or soreness or tenderness of the breasts, cramping. So I'm going to discuss some root fixes to PMS if you are experiencing them, or if most of your cycles have included some sort of negative PMS symptom. PMS is actually premenstrual syndrome, or symptom, and PMS symptoms come from that. So that's not to be equated with the first or the week before your period being that it's PMS week. PMS is there to indicate what is imbalanced in your body. So that second half of your cycle is really there to kind of tell us what's not working and what is imbalanced in our cycle. So I'm going to go over just a few of the PMS symptoms that most women experience. I know there are a ton of them, but I'm going to go with the most common ones I've experienced, I've worked with women who have experienced, and the ones that feel the most troublesome, if you will. And I'm going to start, I have my notes here, so if you see me glancing, because there's a lot of information that I am trying to jam pack over the next 15 minutes. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to discuss is cramping. Put a heart or comment something if you're watching this, and if you've ever had cramps in which you felt like they were debilitating. I mentioned last week about how I have gone from being on my hands and knees in pain and trying all these different yoga poses and stretches just to get out of the pain that I was experiencing, to now having my periods just flow and kind of them being like a pleasant surprise. So if you have cramps, there's a root cause to these things. So we have 2 phases. We have the follicular, if they're broken down like in half, the follicular and the luteal. So the luteal phase requires that our nutrients are up to par. So that's the second part. So you'll notice that the bulk of your symptoms are kind of letting you know, hey, like what you've been doing for the last couple of weeks, it's not working. So if some months you have PMS and some months you do not, you can kind of find like, oh, well, I was doing this last month. So this is where the importance of tracking your cycle comes in, because sometimes we don't remember what we experienced last month. So a journal or just using the notes section in your phone or any type of apps is going to be of importance to you. It's like a mine of gold, because you can kind of compare like, oh, my stress was really, really high last month, and this month it's lower. So my PMS is lower, and that plays into it. So for cramps, usually the indicator, if you have a lot of cramping, maybe even halfway through your cycle, that can happen around ovulation, or the week before, or a couple of days, or maybe even the first 2 days of your new cycle that you are starting. So cramps come from an excess of estrogen. And a really easy food fix for that would be kind of making sure that your diet is balanced. We're going to talk about next week all about nutrition. So you'll get a little bit of blips of what we will discuss next week, but making sure that your diet is high in legumes, veggies, fruits. The key thing that you want to make sure of in preventing cramps is that you are getting adequate fiber. So for women, that's about 30 grams per day. Also that your veggies have tons of color. So each color represents a different type of micronutrient that your body is ingesting. So if you can just make sure you're eating the rainbow, then you can make sure that you're getting all of those different antioxidants and micronutrients. Another common PMS symptom that a lot of women get, and myself included, is cravings. The week before your period, it's actually pretty normal because there's a lot of hormonal shifts going on here. But if you're getting really strong, intense craving for certain types of foods, those can be indicators of certain deficiencies occurring. So if it is chocolate that you're like, I go bananas for chocolate, this is a symptom of magnesium and calcium deficiency. Maybe your body's not getting enough, so that chocolate craving kind of pops up every cycle. Leafy greens, really rich green leafy greens, so not like iceberg lettuce. Think of like spinach and chard, or even like a spring mix. Things are like more colored like this versus like a lime green. Fiber is pretty much going to be the MVP of all things that I'll probably suggest for today and in next week's chat about nutrition, because a lot of women are just really low in fiber. And especially if you are on any type of low carbohydrate diet, so like a keto, which has grown in popularity over the last couple of years, where you take your carbs to an extremely low level, this can be a reason why your diet lacks in fiber because of that fear in carbohydrates. If you have a craving for more carby foods, say like pastas and crackers and breads, more B vitamins is what I'm going to recommend for you. So that's really easy to get it from foods like proteins and whole grains. If you are vegan or vegetarian, making sure that you're loading up on those legumes as well, because those are high in protein, high in fiber. And even if you do eat animal products, I would just always encourage eating legumes, because it's things like beans and chickpeas and those sorts of foods. So they're a bang for your buck, if you will. Fatty foods. So if you're like, I really want a greasy burger or something really oily, it's just an indication that you're low in your essential fatty acids. And really healthy fatty acids that you can get are things like walnuts and flax and chia seeds. So those are foods that you can make sure, if those cravings pop up, make sure, okay, you know what, like I'm going to honor the craving. Maybe I'll have a little small square of dark chocolate. That's not the end of the world. The key is, when you know that those cravings are going to pop up, having healthy foods available, because the last thing that you want to happen is that you go out to the grocery store and then it's because the craving is so high, you're grabbing 5 different pints of ice cream. So having that, like, okay, next week is going to be where my hormones go a little bit different, because I'm going into my premenstruation phase. But if I notice these are a pattern where it's always certain foods, I'm going to make sure when I approach my day 1 of my cycle, I'm getting all of these essential nutrients. Another thing that's really common, and this used to be me, is extreme bloating. And if you get it, like maybe again midway through your cycle, or a week or before you start to bleed, or where you would bleed if you are on a birth control or have other kind of underlying issues or conditions that prevent you from bleeding, bloating sucks. It sucks so much. But again, it is a way for you to get curious rather than frustrated. The biggest thing that's going to be that this symptom of bloating is going to show up is because you have a gut imbalance. it's very possible that you also have an excess of estrogen. So high water content foods are going to be your best friend here. So think things like watermelon, cucumbers, and making sure that you are eating fermented foods, which what are going to have a more probiotic content in them to help balance anything that's imbalanced in the gut. And high quality hydration. Sometimes the water that we are drinking, even though we're drinking tons and tons of it, it might not have all the minerals that you need. So making sure you're fueling up with things like electrolytes. Organifi has a great product called Pure. Highly recommend it, especially if you do really high intensity exercises like hot yoga or you're losing a lot of sweat. You need to give your body those minerals, and sometimes just water on its own isn't enough. So the last I have two more to go, and then I'll end it at that. So sore breasts is another one. This is also going to be a symptom of excess estrogen that has not been cleared out through our lymphatic system. So a very easy way to fix this is massaging the breasts, or even right here, because this is considered the breast tissue. But the reason this is happening is because certain foods can clog our system. And if we are really, really stressed, these foods can maybe kind of linger. So things like caffeine, sugar, highly processed food, alcohol can create kind of like that blockage or buildup where we're not releasing, where if you get a lot of tenderness in your breasts, which is really important because it's actually Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So just constantly checking in that area and making sure you're not eating high amounts of those foods. Of course, having a glass of wine every now and then, or even two, or having your favorite treat that has real cane sugar in it is not going to kill you. But if it is something that is consistent in your diet, and I'm talking like at least small amounts of it every single day, it will add up. And another thing that can affect those symptoms, especially with coming from our blocking our lymphatic system, is things like dairy. If you are not intolerant to dairy and you still want to keep it into your diet, buying a high quality product, because a lot of the animals that we get our dairy products from are pumped with hormones, and those can create hormonal imbalance, things like excess estrogen. The last kind of thing I'll get into is just like making sure that when you want to kind of find more regularity with your cycle. So if your cycle is long or you constantly are missing one, is making sure that you don't have possible underlying conditions like PCOS or endometriosis or anything that would affect your hormonal health. What is happening when you are missing a cycle or your cycle is really long is that you might have elevated levels that are FSH levels that are preventing you from actually ovulating. You might have low estrogen, which is building up the lining of your uterus, to build up the lining of your uterus so you can release and bleed. You could have low body fat. A really good thing to do is just making sure you have a consistent bedtime. This is going to promote a healthy melatonin production, and thus this will support healthy hormonal function. And my last little bit that I'll end with, and I'll check questions and just right after this, is that I've mentioned this excess of estrogen and a lot of these kind of PMS symptoms that show up. And this is actually really common more now than ever, is because a lot of women, maybe you're coming off of birth control and you've been on it since you were 15, or maybe you are on it. And usually the most common case that I see is that women get on birth control when they're very, very young, maybe 15, 16, as a means to get rid of those pesky PMS symptoms or troublesome areas with their cycle. So it's almost as if we're packing on excess estrogen to an excess estrogen issue. So this can create just kind of like a chemical storm of your hormonal health. So if you are coming off of birth control or have a plan to, cycle syncing is your best friend. Nutrition and exercise is the next two topics we'll talk about next week and the following, and supplements that you can take and how you can actually get into this mindset of eating certain foods at different phases, moving certain ways. When it comes to excess estrogen in particular, non-toxic products are going to be your best friends. So things that like have fruity fragrances, like those Bath and Body Works candles and those sprays, those actually can create excess estrogen in your body because those are chemicals that are very, very toxic to us. So if you buy candles, make sure they're soy-based or organic. Kind of look at when those candles have those good qualities in them, they will always list them. Making sure that you might create a budget for buying organic produce, because when we have food that is sprayed heavily with pesticides, that can create hormonal disruption in our bodies. Staying away from dairy. I know it's a really yummy food, but as a plant-based eater and someone who helps women wean off of dairy to find more of a balance of creating a plant-based foundation in their diet, there's so much relief to be found from eliminating or heavily reducing the dairy intake. Making sure you have high quality water, checking with your doctor and getting tests to ensure that your gut microbiome is in good condition, because the gut is like the first brain of the body, and this is the body then follows the brain. So if your gut is not in good health, this could be a cause of why you're having hormonal imbalances that are showing up in your PMS symptoms. Making sure you are managing your stress. And another thing with gut health is that you want regular elimination of your bowels. So going to the bathroom, number 2, every single day is super important. If you have irregular bowel movements or are constantly constipated, your body can't release that excess estrogen. It actually comes out in the toilet. So working on your gut health is super crucial. You can also opt for products, again, pure, and the probiotics that Organifi sells are great, and we'll talk more about that when we get to supplements. And last but not least, anxiety and sensitivities are expected to be high during the premenstrual phase of your cycle, and that is just because of the switch in the hormones. So you might notice that you are a little bit more attentive to details. This might not be the week that you feel the most confident, and if you have this awareness of it, that hey, right now I'm PMSing or I'm in that premenstrual phase, maybe this isn't the time to start nitpicking at your body, and just having that compassion and grace when you are looking at your reflection. And you might have slight bloat, you might be a little bit more emotional, but instead of wondering what's wrong with you or falling victim to these symptoms, kind of using them as little check engine lights to check in with your body is the main thing that I want to end today's chat with. So I'm going to look to see if I have any questions here. It's taking me a while to not get mad at my body, instead just use these signs that something deeper is going on. That's how I capped this off today. How do we find out if you do have those underlying issues? So you can, if you have like specific things that are just occurring, like month after month, I would go to your doctor and just like, hey, I suspect that XYZ is happening. So your doctor can do some blood work. It's really recommended that when you are getting your hormones tested, that you do it at the different stages of your cycle, because during your day 1, when you are bleeding, like your hormones are going to have a whole different picture on day 17, for example. So requesting those at those different phases can give you a lot of like, create this whole picture of what's going on in your body. So I would talk to your doctor. There's also a really, really good test called the Dutch test. A lot of doctors use this, or you can go through health practitioners who have the ability to order the tests and interpret them. I myself am one of them. But if you have insurance and you want to utilize your insurance, then you can go through your regular doctor. I also see one more question here. FSH. So this is the follicle stimulating hormone. So this hormone is what helps control the menstrual cycle and stimulates the growth of eggs in the ovaries. So the levels change throughout the cycle, and this happens right before the highest levels of it are going to happen right before the egg is released by the ovary, which is known as ovulation. So that can mean that like during at certain points of your cycle, if it's too low, this could be a reason why that you aren't ovulating, which thus means that you aren't bleeding, or your cycles are really, really long, like that. And I'm saying longer than, say, 32 days, because some women have shorter cycles, 27, 28 days, and some women have like 32 to 33. Anything past like that 35-day mark would mean that there's something not quite balanced. I don't see any other questions. I will leave it off here. I don't want to take up any more time unless there's any questions. If you type them in there, I'm happy to come back into the group and type in my responses to all of you. But I hope this gave you kind of like a new perspective on how to care for your body during PMS when you have it. It all happens to us, and sometimes it happens when your cycle's sinking and then things just pop up in life. So it can be really empowering to know, like, hey, what's this root reason why I'm feeling this, rather than it just being like, I have to suffer because I have a period, and which I feel a lot of women get on birth control to prevent the bleeding, to prevent the PMS. But PMS is not required to have a period. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next week, same time, same place. And thanks for tuning in with me for those of you that watched live. Bye.